Sleeping on a bench, does he have more privilege than his other homeless counterparts just because he's white?
Yeah, white people who are homeless still have white privilege. This is interesting for me because I actually work with homeless populations and I'm a social work student. And one of the first things they teach us as social workers is that white privilege cuts across every socioeconomic class. Would I describe him as privileged? No. When we do client assessments, you look at all kinds of privilege. Since he's homeless, he probably does not have class privilege. Maybe he's a veteran and he's disabled. He may experience oppression based on disability. We also consider gender, sexuality, citizenship status, etc. But if you're comparing this man to a black transgender woman who's homeless, they're probably going to have very different experiences. A white homeless person is not going to face oppression based on their race in the same way that a person of color who's homeless would. Just because a white person is homeless doesn't mean they don't have white privilege. Sorry, this really isn't about opinion. Any accredited social work program is going to teach this to you as fact.
According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, 1 in 3 black men can expect to go to prison in their lifetime. According to recent data by the Department of Education, African American students are arrested far more than their white classmates for the same crimes. People of color have been redlined for decades into living in disproportionately polluted areas. African American children have a 500% higher death rate from asthma compared to white children. Once arrested, African Americans are 33% more likely to be forced to remain in prison while waiting for their trial. The U.S. Sentencing Committee reported in March 2010 that the federal system's black offenders receive sentences that are 10% longer than white offenders who commit the same crimes. If you think the criminal justice system isn't racist, math proves you wrong. It is. Eugenics is the practice and advocacy of improving the human species by selectively mating people with others with desirable hereditary traits. The term eugenics is most commonly associated with Nazi Germany, even though it was invented by an American, Francis Galton. Hitler was quoted saying, "I have studied with great interest the laws of several American states concerning stopping reproduction by people whose pregnancy, in all probability, would have no value or cause injury to the racial stock." Hitler's eugenic-based national program of race hygiene escalated into a program of euthanasia targeting both children and adults. Jews aren't the only group of people that have been targeted due to eugenics. According to a 1976 Government Accountability Office investigation, between 25 and 50% of Native Americans were sterilized between 1970 and 1976. I think we can all guess who else supports eugenics. Mr. Donald J. Trump. He hides it by renaming it the racehorse theory. Don't be fooled, it's just more eugenics. Is America really number 1? Nope. The U.S. ranks 47th in press freedom, 20th in international trade, 15th in dealing with debt, 10th in economic freedom. There are 21 countries better than America in freedom from corruption. America is ranked 39th in income inequality. Ooh, ouch. Here's a kicker. America is 89th in percentage of children who have been vaccinated, 47th in infant survival, 50th in life expectancy, 142nd in infrastructure investment, 79th in growth rate of industrial production, 11th in oil exports, and 25th among 43 developing countries for the best place to be a mother. You can Google what the U.S. is actually number 1 for, but you won't like it. Can't argue with math. America is not number 1. What are Jim Crow laws? Jim Crow laws were a collection of state and local statutes that legislated racial segregation. They were named after Jim Crow, who was a black minstrel show character, aka a white man in blackface. These laws were upheld for about 100 years, from the post-Civil War era until 1968. Jim Crow laws denied African Americans the right to vote, hold jobs, get an education. They also controlled where they lived, how they traveled, and made it legal to seize their children. Those who attempted to defy Jim Crow laws often faced arrest, fines, jail sentence, violence, and often death. The legal system was, and still is, stacked against black citizens, with former Confederate soldiers working as police and judges, making it difficult for African Americans to win court cases. This was good for the government because these codes worked in conjunction with labor camps for the incarcerated, where prisoners were treated as enslaved people. Black offenders typically received longer sentences than their white equals, and this all is still happening today. Anti-Semitism isn't dead, you're just not seeing it because you're not Jewish. There's actually been a 56% rise in anti-Semitic hate crimes since 2016. My source for this information personally is the ADL Global 100 Index of Anti-Semitism. They did a poll that spread across 102 countries. The poll ended up proving that over 1 billion people worldwide hold anti-Semitic views. Let's get into some of the other numbers from this study. 35% of people polled had never heard of the Holocaust. 41% believe all Jews are more loyal to Israel than their country of birth. And 70% of the anti-Semites had never met a Jewish person. Another reliable survey is the December 2018 EU survey. It found that 80% of European Jews feel that anti-Semitism in their country has increased over the past 5 years, and 40% live in daily fear of being physically attacked. And the number of Nazis is only rising. It's so terrifying. The Confederate flag is anti-America, and here's why. In 1860, 11 Southern states seceded from the United States to protect the institution of slavery. The Confederate flag was made to represent that new divided nation. This flag was used instead of the American flag by the Confederate States. The flag also served as a potent symbol of slavery and white supremacy. The Confederate nation lost the Civil War and therefore never got to fully become their own entity, but the number one priority of said new nation was to protect their right to keep their slaves. By the mid-20th century, the flag symbolized white resistance to ending segregation laws. The flag already represented everything that they stood for, so it was perfect. Then in 1968, when the segregation laws were winding down, the KKK flew it at lynching parties and angry mobs outside public schools where black children were enrolling. Right after the Civil War, the SCV was formed, Sons of Confederate Veterans. The club exists to this day, and they believe the same things and fly the same flag.